There are a lot of different opinions about the use of black paint. Some teachers even prohibit the use of black paint. Let's not forget there are many great pieces of art of artists who never wanted to use black, like Monet for instance, but there are as many fantastic paintings of artists who did use black. However, this last category of artists all had one thing in common: they made sparingly use of black. And when they used black, they always made sure to add other colors as well in the black. For instance, brown or blue. And I think that's the main thing to keep in mind. We almost never encounter pure black. And there are a lot of varieties within black parts itself. There are some things to consider when using black paint. Let me show you an example. When painting a nose, we might be tempted to grab some black paint for the nostrils and bam, there we go. But oops, it immediately looks unnatural. Now, this is not the black paint's fault, it's just caused by an error in observation. And the nostril might be dark, but A, it's not pitch black, and B, it contains color. And we all make these kinds of errors, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Learning to paint is actually more about learning to observe better. And that's also why painting is so fun. We enhance our ability to perceive more objectively. Nostrils aren't the only dark things in our lives. There are so many situations where things look black to us, while in reality it may be dark, but not yet black. And it even may contain more color than we might have thought. So that's what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. When you see something very dark, first ask yourself the question, am I not being tricked or fooled by what I think I see? How dark is it in reality? How much color does it contain in reality? But how do we check if our perception gets fooled? There are some tricks. If you use a value finder, for instance, you can check how dark a color in reality is. Also, if you compare these gray colors of the value finder to the source color, you can easily spot that the dark color you see contains more color than only black and white. If you don't have a value finder, just grab something else that's really pitch black and compare that to your source color. So it could be the case that for these reasons some teachers prohibit their students to use black paint. But the problem with that is, in my opinion, that then it becomes a rigid rule. There definitely are cases when it's absolutely fine to use black paint. You can use black and white to make a gray mixture, for instance, to tone colors down. And also black can be used to darken colors, and often you can use other colors in that mixture as well to give it a certain color bias. And now I'll show you that you can get the same result, of course, with other methods. In this case, I add a combination of ultramarine and burnt umber. That's a dark mixture. So I made a dark mixture of only colors, and you see, you get the same kind of result. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between these two. So why would it matter if you use the black in this case? But it must be said, black paint in pure form, or if you use a lot of black, can look rather dull on your canvas, especially in combinations with surrounding colors. And if you make a very dark color yourself by mixing two dark colors like burnt umber and ultramarine, you get more of a vibrant dark color. And that's more pleasing to the eye and it's more coherent with the colors surrounding it. If you make a black color yourself by mixing other dark colors, we call that a chromatic black. Now personally I like to make dark colors with ultramarine blue and burnt umber, but there are also artists that use ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, for instance, and there are also other possibilities. It's just what you like most. One thing to keep in mind with these chromatic blacks sometimes, especially with ultramarine and burnt umber, is that these pigments are quite transparent. So sometimes you need a second layer for full coverage. Now the second layer. But this is also one of the reasons a layered dark color looks more intense than just flat black paint on your canvas. So personally, I almost never use pure black in paintings. But on the other hand, if I have to darken a color ever so slightly, then I sometimes, out of laziness, grab some black. Now, maybe you've already noticed, if you go to the shop to buy black paint, ta-da! There are a lot of different kind of black paints again. So, choices, choices, choices. These black paints all have different characteristics. Some blacks have a very high tinting strength. Some blacks have a low tinting strength. In Dutch we have a but the in English is sometimes rather difficult. But there are blacks that are more warm and there are blacks that are more cool, and there are all kinds of variations in between. And of course, these characteristics of the black paints influence the outcome of your mixture. So for instance, if you want a cool grayish color, then maybe you grab some white paint and black paint and you start mixing, and then you get a warm gray color because accidentally you have a black paint that's more to the warm side. And you can have the other way around, of course, as well. If you want a warm gray containing more brown and you only have a cool black, well, there you go, then you don't get the kind of grey that you want. Of course, then you can add another color as well, and that's another reason why I like using a chromatic black that contains burnt umber and ultramarine blue. I can make the balance more to a neutral grey, I can make the balance more towards brown so that I can get a warmer grey, or I can add slightly more ultramarine blue and then I get a cooler grey. Then last but not least, the tinting strength is also important. Some blacks have a very high tinting strength, and that means that the pigment is very strong. So if you mix a tiny amount of that black paint with white, then it has a great effect on that white. But there are also blacks, like ivory black for instance, that have a low tinting strength, and if you add the same amount of ivory black with the same amount of white, you see that it hardly has an effect on the white. So that makes a difference as well. And therefore my last tip, if you want to make black and white studies, of course then black and white paint is ideal. Personally, I prefer the use of ivory black, because ivory black has a low tinting strength. It's easier to make subtle mixtures, I find. But again, try it for yourself. Now, I hope that was helpful. Feel free to comment, and also if you have video suggestions as well, please leave them in the comments. That gives me inspiration to make new videos, of course. Also, if you like, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the description. Every little bit of support helps. Thank you so much. See you next time. By the way, if you want to learn more about the different kind of blacks, I've listed them on my website in a blog. Link is in the description.